Apologies for keeping you waiting. Rick, I think just administerial, is this a new meeting link relative to the regular?
No, I just, sometimes people, a random committee member will ask me for the link on the day of a meeting, so I just sent out the same link that was in the meeting invitation.
Okay, no worries. The only reason I ask is
What's up, Pat?
Zoom wouldn't let me in.
What's up, Pat?
At Zoom. Hey, Christy Kickham, you're unmuted. Please mute. So good morning, everyone. Again, apologize for the delay. Go ahead, jump in and get started. For the record, Stephen Welch, Chair of the Capital Program Committee. I'd like to confirm access. Christy Ferrantella. Peter Kaiser.
Yep.
Christy Kickham. You're frozen, Chris. Oh no, you're just in portrait. Christy Kickham. Jason Bridges.
Here, hi.
Hi, good morning. Richard Hussey.
Here.
Jill Veith.
Here.
Hi, Terry, and good morning, Rick. Let's see, there's no guests, no public comments, no requests were made. This open meeting of the Capital Program Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. It's being convened via Zoom with audio and video recording. There's a good chance will be broadcast later on the town's YouTube channel. Note that anything presented on Zoom may be captured by recording and broadcast to the public. Town's website identifies how the public may join. Unless otherwise noted, materials provided to members for the meeting or reviewed during the meeting are available on the town's website. During the meeting, I'll introduce topics. Please mute your Zoom audio and comments through the chair to make it easier for Terry taking minutes. With that said, I'd like to call this meeting the Capital Program Committee to order. It's December 9th at a little bit after 10 a.m. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Richard, on your motion?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Christy Kickham? I see you blinking, so I know you're not frozen. Jason Bridges?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that carries. So I want to thank everyone for getting your Rory's wrapped up, at least to the extent that's practical. I understand we'll have a discussion. I've asked that we have a discussion about Rory's that do not have supplemental details. I think that may come up organically during Rory review, but I'd like to hold substantive discussion on that topic until after Rory's. And the reason that is that we can address it. We can address it to the extent any member prefers, which is my preference. But the Rory's need to be wrapped up so that I can complete the up-down list to provide to town admin today, and that will be going into or tomorrow rather, and then that will be going to the select board and the FinCom in order to meet our scheduled dates. So I don't want to have a discussion if it turns out to be lengthy about supplemental documents not having been submitted at the expense of processing the Rory's. I hope that's acceptable to everyone. I'm going to jump right into the Rory's. We're at the point where we will have a group discussion, determine which Rory's, which requests to advance with our recommendation for this year and which to recommend for an out year. Sometimes we will occasionally say, rarely we'll say, we don't think a request is worthy as it is. If one of those comes up, we can address it as such. But again, that's pretty rare. I just didn't want to leave it unsaid. Before we start, I will share the screen. And do you all see the spreadsheet with some fancy green, yellow, and red cells?
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone not see it? Please put your hand up. Okay, great. It's probably a better way to handle that. Let me just get the gallery set up here so I can view you guys. With me. Perfect, technology is fun this morning. Okay, what I've done here, I'm just going to go quickly through what's in front of you. This column with the coloring is the group Rory, so that's the average ranking. as a team. And the color is that anything above 10% or more above the average is in green. Anything within a band of 10% to either side of the average is in yellow. And anything that's more than 10% below the average is in red. There's a couple different things we've done in the past. One is that anything that is above a certain, presuming everyone's comfortable with it, anything more than 10% above the average would go into the hopper. The hopper concept for new members is not unlike town meeting. It goes in the hopper and it gets voted on at the tail end of the meeting, along with any others we determine that we will recommend. Is just a quick question to poll. Is anyone uncomfortable with using 10% above average as the threshold for immediate automatically in the hopper? Okay, so we will go ahead. Anything 10% above is considered in the hopper, as I've indicated in this column. I'll try and track these as we go. I would appreciate if anyone notices I haven't caught something correctly to please go ahead and comment. The next items are Christie Kickham.
Steve, even though they're going into the hopper, doesn't rule them out for a discussion though, is that right?
Correct, and I'll
Okay.
get to that in a moment. Thank
Got
you.
it.
Yep. So the next group, the question I have is, unless someone, all of these are contingent upon Christie's comment, Christie Kickham's comment, which is our tradition that if anyone wants to speak on a particular request, we will do so. But with that in mind, is there anyone uncomfortable with the idea that anything, unless it's called, that is 10% below average would be for an out year? So for instance, decommissioned fire, let's just give ourselves an example. Decommissioned fire cisterns came in at 45.8, which the average, by the way, was 62.8. So it was, nearly 17 points below what the group's average ranking was for requests. Before we vote on whether we want to proceed that way, the average, I've taken different approaches over the years and found that in the end, with respect to the mathematics of determining an average, or do we use a mean, or do we use standards of deviation? Our sample set numerically is so small in terms of a range that doing anything under the average works fine too, but it doesn't give us any other result. There's not a dramatic swing one way or the other from the statistical standpoint of processing the numbers. So this is simply a matter of, does the membership feel comfortable with items 10% below the average being put in an out year recommendation? Jason?
I like that approach. I like it for both sides, above and below. Green all goes in the hopper, red all is out, and then we go through. Do you want to call anything? Does anybody have any issues? No. And then maybe spending more time on the yellow, which is going through those one by one, would
Yep.
make sense to me.
Okay, great. Yeah, and that's the plan. And what we'll do is just slightly different is we'll go through, I'll go through quickly, any that are called that are in the green, I'll annotate. And then we'll go through the yellows first, because those are the ones that may have more room for discussion based upon the numerical value. And if we have time at the end of the meeting, which I presume we will, we'll hit the greens. So I'm going to take it that any that are more than 10% below the average are, again, unless called, recommended for an out year. Is there anyone who would like to proceed otherwise? Okay, great. With that, we've got a little bit more ministerial to tackle. I'm just going to again go through any of the greens to see if anyone would like to have a discussion on a particular request. Is from the top, road improvements. And I'm just going to ask for the purposes of processing this information, if you would like to call it, put your hand up. You don't have to stand up like a town meeting, but just put your hand up. Multi-use path. Okay. Sorry, I get this little thing popping up on my screen about sharing, and it's annoying. The Washington Francis Union Streets intersection. Replace the SCBA's. Firefighting foam disposal and replacement. 5-year review of the natural hazard and hazard mitigation. Harbor plan implementation, groundwater mapping. Okay. Maintain network infrastructure and server virtualization and maintenance, 2 separate requests. Renovate, reconstruct the harbor master building. Let's see, our Island home. This R Island home request is for not operations capital related. So it'll be a general fund. Okay. The Loran seasonal housing repairs part 2, Parks and Rec master plan phase 1 of 3 as adjusted. NPS roof replacements, campus-wide improvements, and NPS building improvements. 2 Fairgrounds municipal office building, soft costs. New senior center feasibility design construction, soft costs. Paint and, we're jumping to airport, paint and beads and rubber markings. Jumping down to RLN Home Enterprise, the new generator shed, sewer, the membrane at the wastewater treatment plant, capacity management, the CMOM, replace the main Jenny. Okay, good. So with that said, we can focus on those that are within the 10% band. And I'm not quite sure how y'all want to proceed with. I didn't delineate those that are 5% under versus they're in the band. And the utility of that delineation would be that we may say, well, if it's both, in my mind, is if and when we have funding, a funding recommendation from town manager, that might help us kind of weed out requests that we don't have enough overall funding for. But I think at this point, without a idea of what the funding recommendation will be overall, we would not want to restrict ourselves. These are in fair play, and we'd go ahead and discuss those. Is Jason?
Just, because talking to Libby, each week, I know like Milestone Bike Path Extension, Monomoy to Pulpus, it's going to be more expensive than that. So I know I would suggest taking that out and doing it out years because there's too many things we don't know. But are you saying Libby and Brian are going to come in and do a lot of that for us?
No, that's a good point. Specifically on Milestone, that'll be good information when we get to that request. And then overall, it's more, we'll have a discussion. It's of each of these requests, they're within a 5% below or above the average. If we find very shortly in our process that the funds that are going to be recommended by the town manager do not cover what our recommendation totals, we would start with those at the next meeting. We would start re-reviewing any that are below the average in that bottom 5% of the 10% band. Does that make?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And I didn't want to go to that level now just because it's complicated and it's got low utility if the funding recommendation from the town manager aligns with our own.
Mhm.
If there's a shortfall, the other way of saying it is if there's a shortfall, we need to do more work and it will be that 5% band that we start with. Rick, did you have your hand up?
I just wanted to flag something about the greens just on the 2, like, I know, Stephen, you're going to use these for your recommendation starting after the meeting, but Loran and Washington Francis are both, they're different, as I put in that email. So I don't know if you want to find out if anybody's going to have a, visceral reaction to Loran housing phase 2 being $4.5 million instead of $2.5 million, and maybe you want to re-rory it. Just wanted to flag those 2 because Washington Francis has gone from $1.5 million when you roared it to $500,000 because we're going to do less work there at this point in time. I'm just.
No, I
from a
appreciate
process.
that. So what Rick brings up, Rick and I have discussed some projects, including, not only dollar amounts, but their backup information. And how we're going to address what Rick's talking about is we're going to rank the information we have in front of us currently. At the next meeting, we will be reviewing these changes to the dollar amounts. And then if we need to make a change in our recommendation, we will do so. And it can be a supplemental issuance to the select board and the town manager and the FinCom. But at this point, just for the sake of simplicity, We're going to just proceed with what we have in front of us. That includes whether particular request had supplemental information or not. And we'll go from there. So Rick, I do appreciate you bringing that up because it probably answers questions other members may have. Christie Kickham?
Steve, are you saying that the band is 5% or 5 points above and 5 points below?
The latter.
Okay,
And
So-
if we get in a money crunch, we'll review the 5% below.
and you said the averages was 62.8?
Yeah,
I'm just, because I'm looking at the screen here, because this is what I can look at because of getting shared. There's down at hazard mitigation. It looks like the Maya Comet Pond could be in the green because it's 5 points would be 67.8.
where are we? I'm sorry.
Hazard
think you-
mitigation.
I think he means 10 percentage, like whole points, not 10% of the 62, I'm guessing. But I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
because it rounds out to a higher number. So
Okay,
there may be a numerical deviation for tenths and hundredths.
yeah, I got you. Okay, that's
Is
fine.
it within the tenths and hundredths?
Yeah, it's real
Okay.
close. It was just a little bit above, so, but
Yeah.
that makes sense.
No, that's fine. I'll
Well,
take that for government work. Within hundredths of a percent.
For
Peter?
for clarification, Chris, are you saying that 10% of the 62.8 would technically be 6.3 points? Is that what you're saying?
I just was, if it was a 5 point scale, not percent, then it was gonna be in the green, whereas, but
Right.
Per-
Whereas
percent-
Stephen, you're using a whole 10 percentage points jump, right? So from 62.8 to 72.8.
No, so it's the 10% band is, let's just do this once because it'll be easier to.
Gotcha. No, okay, sorry. I was confused by Christie's question then. So you are using 10% of the 6.2 or the 62.8.
Yeah, and I think this is what we're gonna do in order to avoid potential delays, which if this may be. I'm a PC guy, not necessarily in life all the time, but when it comes to computers, and I'm on an Apple. So as a point, I can jump around in spreadsheets very fluidly, but with this particular software, it's a little more difficult. And the commands and the shortcuts I use. So what I'm gonna suggest is we go through these. If you sense there's a deviation in what the numbers are in terms of what's being represented by green, yellow, or red, as we go down through the list, just call it out. So the example would be the one Christie just made. And if there's a rule, if the rule is off somehow, we can address it individually. With all that said, all helpful, appreciate it. Is there anyone, we're gonna just quickly go through the yellows to see if anyone wants to actually review any of these yellows. So sidewalk improvement plan. Cobblestone improvements. Milestone bike path. Now, to be clear, because we've had a lot of discussion, the purpose of this is to call out a request that you would like to have discussion on, because otherwise it will end up in the hopper as part of our out year recommendation. So that's the process we're undertaking right now. So with having clarified that, or of any of the three that I just mentioned, would anyone like to talk about? Peter?
I'm just wondering, given Jason's input, that this probably is going to be put to an out year. Should we not put it in the hopper?
Oh, I thought he had said that the cost, maybe I misheard him. I apologize.
Or maybe I did as
Jason,
well, but
Milestone bike path, did you say that it was an additional cost, or am I confusing that with comments Rick made about a different project?
Talking to Libby yesterday, I thought there was gonna be additional cost. That cost might be in this number if it's been adjusted. But my question was that I would put it in review or put it in an out year and then have Libby come in and clarify. Or if she's going to already, Rick/Libby, I just really don't know how you want to handle the process.
Okay, so what we're gonna,
Feedback or just get it out.
yeah, so what we'll do is we'll rank what we have in front of us. And if there's a supplemental request, which it sounds like there will be, not in terms of supplemental for the request itself, but relative to what we've already reviewed, we'll pick that up at our next meeting. And if we need to change our recommendation for any particular request, we can do it then. Does that work for you guys? Okay. So with that said, just because it's voted in the hopper and recommended this round, there's no request that we can't pull out at a later date and review either up or down or whatever it is. Okay. Pleasant Street repaving. All right, so the advanced life saving. Replace the ambulance number 3. Replace the portable radios. Replace the utility truck. Pulpus Road, Sackatchew Pond interim hardening. The sediment transport and dredge plan. Maya Comet Pond dredging, design and permitting. Chrissy, was this one you mentioned?
It was, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so-
I mean, it's fine where it's at, Steve. So the scoring makes sense to me.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, and so this falls within the 10% band of 10% added
Yeah.
to the average.
Got it.
Okay,
Thank you.
so our numerical rules are working.
Yes.
Vehicles replacement, that's for the Health and Human Services. Okay. Town computers. GS digital imaging updates. Replace the wireless network. Marine maintenance building phase 2. Jetties Beach tennis court crack sealing. We've got, I'll go through these quickly. If anyone has a particular one, just, we can clear it up later. We've got 3 requests, excuse me, for public works for vehicles. One, first request is 2 Ford Rangers. The next is a skid steer loader replacement. And the other is, excuse me, an F-350. Anyone on that? Okay. And then the vibratory roller replacement. Okay, thank you, excuse me. We're going to jump down to town admin, townwide document management system, seasonal employee housing, PFAS, senior employee housing feasibility study. Let's see, we'll go to airport. They provided list of the vehicles and the equipment. That item, anyone? Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I mean, I originally had issue with that one because it looked like they just lumped a lot of things together, some of which were under 50,000, but I don't think we're gonna get any resolution in that, but I guess just more of a comment.
Okay,
I don't know
fair
if
enough.
there's any review to be had, but
Okay, yeah, and then, so they did provide, and were you able to review the breakdown they provided via spreadsheet?
Mhm.
Okay, so you're good with it?
yeah, I mean, I don't think we're gonna have any resolution from it. I just, you don't like to see a lot of different unrelated types of things kind of boxed together into one request. And it seemed like it was some vehicles, some golf carts, some equipment, some,
Yeah.
but-
Okay, no, that's a fair comment, and I don't want to leave it unaddressed, and then Christie Kickham, I'll go to you. This is, I don't want to get into too much detail on it because we'll talk about it next week, but with respect to our report, typically there's a lengthy narrative that gets into not only our process, but our recommendations. We're 3 years into our recommendations. Many of them need to be reviewed and updated. We may need to make expansions on those recommendations or to thin them up a little bit because things have been accomplished along the route that have been helpful. So one of those, part of that discussion will be recommendations, both that we would put in the report and recommendations we may have with respect to how we process or how we want to process information. And Peter, this would be to your point, is that we may determine that as a matter of policy, we would like to see a particular way these are, even if they're lumped, we may want to see them lumped in subcategories. Or we may want to see them split apart, subject to their meeting capital requirements. That's a discussion we'll have, and we'll have interactively with Rick in the event that affects how they all do work. But that's something we'll pick up at the next meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
Long way of saying, a lot of information, you can weed through what you want, what you don't, but it's a long way of saying that your point is taken and it will be addressed.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're at back to the airport, IT and equipment upgrades. The A220 gate, hard stands. the permitting for airport layout. So soft cost there. The commuter apron reconstruction, terminal improvements, direct digital control system for the terminal, and the master plan, soft costs. Okay. We're jumping down to sewer, watertight sewer manholes, design of the new garage maintenance facility, and the PFAS removal and treatment. Okay. Smart compactor waste receptacles under solid waste. And under want to comment, the water main extension at the Delta and Novadear playing fields. Okay, so the end result of that is that basically there were no items to put into the review column. So that means we've completed our review based upon the level of review at the individual request level. Again, that is not to say that after today's meeting, or even now, if someone would like to call one of these requests, that we can then review it. So unless anyone has their one last chance for today's meeting, and then you can review the list and we can pick it up again next week. Are there any requests that anyone would like to speak on in particular?
And does this include the red too, the 10% below?
Yeah, anything on the list.
Okay.
And I apologize. I mean, I can scroll it if you want. But,
You might not be able to see all the participants, but Christie has his hand up.
oh, I'm sorry, Christy, go ahead. Christy, kick
Yeah,
off.
it's just a general comment. Every year we go through, I gotta admit, I've got a tough time with staff vehicles. Specialized vehicles are pretty easy to me, but there's no, it's hard to get criteria for replacing staff vehicles and adding staff vehicles. I admit, I struggle with those a little bit, whether it's the airport or DPW. At any time, any department head can say, well, I need a vehicle for this or that. And we have no sort of guide to sort of steer us through. And it seems like over the many years I've been doing this, everyone always gets a vehicle that they need. Just a thought.
Okay,
Can I jump in on that?
Jason, go ahead.
I feel the same way, Christy. That's what always falls to the bottom, right? In the 4 or 5 years I've been doing this, nobody wants to give unspecialized vehicles, just to transport for admin or whatever. Is there a way, this is maybe for next year, to look, we really need to compare, like, what are the estimated mechanical costs to repairing the existing vehicle? If it's that bad and it's $3 or $4 grand a year and there's no mechanics on the island, then it behooves us to maybe that would make more sense to replace it. Then we have something to compare it to, something like that. Then maybe that would help us, Christy.
Yeah, or if I may, yeah, or if we're properly taking care of them while we own them. As we buy it, is it staying inside? Is it being properly cleaned out? Once a month. What's the care of that vehicle over the lifetime that we have it? And
Well, it's
you
not,
know what I mean?
they're all kept outside.
Yeah,
So it's not great.
yeah.
So where I'd like to go with this is, these are points well taken, number one. Number two is, I think this fits into the discussion that we will have about our process, our policies, our procedures. Where this may go, depending on if, Christy, you want to bring this up again at the next meeting, and we can try and dig into it. Because I think this is a worthwhile element. Vehicles are aging out, staffing numbers are going up to meet workload demands. Vehicles, there is not necessarily, to my understanding, a policy as to what are the thresholds to acquire or replace a vehicle based on useful life? What are the thresholds for buying a new vehicle relative to staff requirements? For instance, somebody needs a vehicle for 4 hours a week versus a vehicle is needed for a full-time position who is out in the field 7 hours a day. Then the other element of that I think would bear some fruit is, but perhaps create difficulties, which isn't my intention, is to what extent are these vehicles under central fleet management? Because then we get into that comment, Christy, you had made a little bit about whether the wheeled stock is indoors, but also what type of maintenance are they getting? I think that what we'll find as a practical matter is that trying to determine that particular facet, unless we determine there's no maintenance plan in place, then we would ask that there be one put in place, will be diminishing returns, because the level of detail that we would need to acquire, the amount of time we would need from staff to kind of elaborate on that information for whether a vehicle's been properly maintained to the degree we each subjectively may want it to be, it's going to be less of a return than simply knowing there is a policy in place that the fluids are checked and it goes in for its 15,000 mile, it's 30,000, and so on and so forth. Again, I think that this is a discussion that we should put on our agenda, because it could kind of go outside of the scope of what we're talking about today with Rory's. So there's a procedural aspect to that I want to make sure we're observing. But I also think we need to give it due justice. So this, and then the other discussion, which I think these two segue and connect, is Peter's comments about how these are categorized and presented as requests. Jason?
The active shooter response, I'd love to hear why people put that so low. I did not. I know it's for the fire department, not the police department.
Okay.
It just seems like short money for, catastrophe if it does happen.
Right. Is there anyone who'd like to opine, Peter, for a moment while I try and pull up the?
Yeah, well, so more, not directly on this response, but I think again, this gets into something more philosophical about our process where, it's hard to bump something up because it might be short money or a small amount versus a large amount. So I don't necessarily disagree with you, but sometimes the way that you work through the different Rory criteria, the value is what it is. But then after the fact, you say, well, but for, 50 or 50,000 or 75,000, I'm in your camp. You say, well, but if it's short money and it might save lives, why don't we make an exception for it? And then the question is, do we have the latitude in this process to do that? Because I feel the same way about small requests sometimes as I do about large requests that might seem a high priority, but maybe the numbers get so big that we look at it again. And so that was going to be one of my questions for, I guess, our follow-up conversation without remembering how I voted it.
Okay, I'm just curious. I wanted to hear from people why it was so low. I know it's medium, not high priority. So maybe that has some.
Yeah, and I honestly don't remember what my Rory ultimately was. I could look it up, but I was just more commenting to your point. If it's, I don't have the dollar amount in front of me, but if it's $50,000 or $75,000, even if it's below 10%, it might be worth our while to say, it ended up at a 42, but for $50,000 compared to some of the other much larger requests that seem less likely to possibly save lives, maybe it's something that we consider, voting in even though it's below our threshold.
Okay. Christy Ferrantella, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna add that I think sometimes requests like this don't exactly match up to the way our Rory questions are. And so I rated it really high on operations, but the other categories, is this a replacement? It's not. Is it going to improve efficiency? That's a hard question to answer. I think sometimes it's the questions in the Rory that made it rank a little bit lower, not necessarily that we value this as a lower priority.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% accurate. I'm actually pulled up the group ranking. And so continuity B, which is heritage, tradition, culture, and legacy, which we had determined was an important aspect. And by the way, I just want to back up for a second, especially for new memberships. Jill, this would be good information for you if we hadn't discussed it in the past. The Rory's, the criteria are based upon categories created. Specifically, the criteria are based upon the financial policies and procedures that were adopted by the select board back in 2016. That was as a result of a compact state-funded development program with the Department of Revenue. And so these are criteria, they call it priorities and rankings, I believe, in their language, but that are promoted by the Department of Revenue. The legacy, but I want to be clear, the heritage, tradition, culture, and legacy was something that we added as a group in subsequent to that, based upon the fact that Nantucket is, as we all know, a very unique and wonderful place due to that uniqueness. So that was something that we felt needed to be weighted in. To the bigger point, yes. So for instance, if it's not one of the reasons we wanted to, well, I won't get into why we did the Rorys. I think that's a longer discussion if anyone ever wants to have it. Find me a cup of coffee, or I'll do it in public so everyone understands it. But one of the things we're trying to promote is scheduled replacements. So there is, if something isn't scheduled in advance, the culture is being changed with respect to department heads so that they're thinking in advance. This, like for me, actually rose to a scheduled replacement in the sense that Chief has been in asking for it for a few years now. So that is something, if you all want to review, that part of the utility of having these discussions is to see how different people use the categories. If someone goes through after this discussion and says, gee, you know, I didn't think about schedule replacement that way, that is another way to apply it. Or you may say, he doesn't know what he's talking about, that's okay too. But it may change the overall score. And if you go in and you re-rank something, please let me know, because I'll check the scores and we can have subsequent discussion on it. I agree that I guess just to close that out, that yes, it is the criteria determine the outcome. And unfortunately, you know, maybe that's one of the things we have a discussion about. Do we want to broaden our, you know, one of the things I'd like to broaden into is the funding source. Is it cash? Is it finance for 30 years? Is it finance for 2 years? Is finance for 3? The other category is what's the impact on the tax base? So these are good discussions, material, substantive discussions we can have as a body, and it can be as granular as what are those specific Rorys. So I hope you all entertain those thoughts and concepts. Christy Kickham.
Stephen, not to reroute the process, but in the maybe a few years ago, we did have access to people's Rorys and were able to discuss more in detail why maybe people voted a certain way. And I recall that generating a lot of discussion, and just instead of looking at our averages, even to the point that some of these, I don't know exactly what I voted on as well. So I didn't know if there was an opportunity to share those.
There is. I was going to do that. Rick, I see your hand. One moment. There's a couple of things here. One is I believe that there's greater utility exercising that level of involvement closer to when we rank each of the requests. I also believe it would be helpful for the membership if we built a little more. So that means building time into our schedule so we can do it at a time that's closer to when the Rorys were actually completed. I would also like, and this is on my list of things to discuss next week or the following week. We don't have to discuss all these next week. We have the winter months to work on these, but the idea that we have time during a meeting to complete our Rorys, to look at the group average. I think there's a fine line between having the group think influence our Rorys. So how I'd probably structure it is we have discussion about we complete our Rorys, we look at the group, we might have discussion about why someone did something different. We understand what caused perhaps an outlier, whether it was a personal bias, I don't mean that in a bad way, or if it was a piece of information the rest of the group didn't have. So your point is well taken. It is something we're going to have to take up. The big crux of that, though, is we need to build the time into our schedule. We're not scheduling enough time to do the Rorys timely and then benefit from the group interaction. And I think it's just something that I will exercise discipline on and not feel pressed on schedule. And I will, step up to the plate for our committee to say, no, we need more time. Not to suggest we need months more time or anything like that, but it is an important element. Rick, did you want to comment? I apologize for going.
Yeah, no, okay. I because I can see the individual Rorys. I can tell you with respect to this one, it's not because, I don't believe it's because the Rory process, the categories aren't correct. In this particular case, we have two people that have rated this thing in the 60s and two people who rated it in the 20s, and then some stuff in the middle. So there's a true dichotomy of view on whether this is you know, a project that should go forward. I don't think it's about a shortcoming of the Rory process. Just a comment, since I can see the individual Rorys.
Okay, thanks. And then just another comment on where the value of reviewing these timely would be. In my mind, I check this off as an 80% replace, 70 or 80% schedule replacement. I'm looking at the group Rory and I have 0. Now, the ultimate effect on the overall score would be relatively small, but I think there is utility even in practical aspects of doing the Rorys timely in a group, individually, while we're together, and then reviewing them. And it would pick up silly things like, I didn't enter what I thought I entered. Peter, on this?
Sorry,
Or
can you
otherwise-
just repeat that? Do you say you scheduled this at 80% scheduled replacement?
I think I probably had it in at like 70% schedule replacement, because for me, schedule replacement means different things. And there is an inherent difficulty with these categories because we can't encompass everything. So I use them in a way like schedule replacement could mean, for example, it's within a town plan and town manager, you know, from top down. It could mean that it's within the department head's plan. It's not and what I mean by top down is that it's a high priority for the administration or the select board. Or it could be something that is a low priority with regards to, you know, we only have a certain amount of money, but it's a high priority for a department head. In this instance, the chief has brought this forth for a few years. So for me, it was a schedule replacement. It consistently for 3 years, that ranked in the anywhere between 60 and 80% schedule replacement using a kind of an arbitrary valuation. But that's what the Rorys are for, is for us to assign our arbitrary valuations, our subjective valuations, I should say, not arbitrary.
And this was for the active shooter response gear?
Oh, you know what? I apologize. I've got the trench, the rescue in my mind.
Gotcha. Okay,
Okay.
gotcha. I was
So-
a little confused there.
So let's pretend that all my
Steven,
examples related to the trench, because then they would be valid. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense.
Understood. Got it.
Okay, I think we've kind of really good discussion on this, but we're getting beyond the scope for a particular request. So I'm going to go back to our list, which has been on your screen the whole time, and I've been looking at the Rory groups. Are there others that anyone might want to have discussion on at this point? Again, noting that we can pick this up again. Richard?
Can we look at the airport listing?
Yep.
And I just want to make sure I understand what AIP projects are. I understand them to mean 90% federal funding, 5% from the state, and the town puts up the remaining 5%. So
Sorry. Go ahead.
is that accurate? Am I correct on that?
I don't have the exact percentages, but I believe that is correct. You're well below order of magnitudes.
It's correct.
I think you're right.
Is there any example of where we have approved funding for something that was labeled AIP and the government did not follow through with their funding? And we were on the hook, the town was on the hook for the entire funding of that project. Is there any history on that?
That will be squarely in the Rick camp, and I'll ask if he might.
And
do a
Rick
little
will
bit of
chase it down.
research on that. It should be a quick call to the airport, but that would be something, unless he's got one to mind, that would be a question for the airport.
So just following, assuming that all of those projects have come through and we've never been on the hook for a project that we thought the government was going to pay 95% for, why wouldn't we approve, just as a matter of course, all of the AIP projects? Because they're significantly funded by federal and state government. That's just a question.
So I'll comment on that. Christy Kickham, I'll get to you in a moment. So this is actually where there's one other area where there are kind of practices that might outweigh an average. So the Rory is giving us a ranking of relative importance relative to a set of standardized criteria, so that there's consistency from year to year and in our own discussions. However, whether something is fully paid by someone else, we may have something that gets a 20%, but it's going to be paid by someone else. So it doesn't necessarily fit the ranking criteria in a way that's ranks it high, but it's literally going to be funded by donation or the federal government. So those we can always, there's nothing that says these averages are set in stone. That's what our discussions are about. So for instance, Richard, if this had come in at a 20%, you would have that question and we would say, of course, we're going to recommend it, put it in the hopper. The other area, just to be clear, because I didn't touch on it for this season, is whether something is, there are categories that override rankings, and those would primarily be imminent threat of life or safety or a legal requirement. And those I'll be going through to see if there's any that fall below the average, or maybe actually I'll be asking Rick to please do that. And so that if there was anything we recommended for an out year that was actually a life safety or imminent life safety or a legal requirement, at the next meeting, we would just adjust our list with the additional information provided. Yes, we'll take as much money as we can get. And if it helps us move forward, God bless us. Other thoughts on airport? Richard, did you follow up, or, and then Christy and then Peter?
No, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Does that answer? I'll take it as it answered your question. Christy Kickham.
I thought that question came up to the airport when they were here, either this year or last year. And I think they had mentioned when they had a thought that the project was not going to get funded, they'd just pull it and maybe put it in an out year. But I think the AIP is pretty reliable, but I just recall that. As to the airport rescue firefighting, I don't recall exactly what I scored, but when I was out there, I think 2 years ago during the site inspection, in the garage, they have 3 like almost brand new looking. I mean, there's one that's from the 80s, but I will say it looks brand new. And that might have come into my thought and my whole thought about approving vehicles. But they take really good care of their equipment. It is always garaged, and that's just a comment.
Okay, thanks. Rick?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, Christy. It's kind of an interesting one. So if you recall, this particular truck is for the new sized, it's a requirement for the new sized equipment that JetBlue is talking about bringing to the island. So in a certain respect, you wouldn't approve line 126, the gate hard stands, because those are for the A220s that particular rescue truck or the firefighting truck supports. So you shouldn't do one without the other, because it's all related to the new equipment that JetBlue and I guess others are talking about bringing in.
Right, and so then this becomes borderline, now that I'm on the right topic, as opposed to the trench safety, which was kind of an elective. This becomes a topic of discussion for the next meeting after we do a review of life safety and legal requirements. So the airport, I presume, has a legal requirement for not that you will save lives, but that you will be properly equipped to save lives. And then it comes into a discussion about those life safety and legal requirements that we'll revisit next week. I do want to touch base one other thing, Peter, and then you. This is a great example of where reviewing Rory's timely gives us feedback from members that we might not ordinarily have. It's also a great example of where having liaisons to departments, Jill, what we would do, and Christy Ferrantella, we didn't do it during COVID, but we would have members volunteer and they would meet after requests were submitted with department heads in situ and kind of review things and get their own perspective on it to be able to report back to the group shortly during the meeting after the department head did their presentation and had departed. So that was also helpful. Peter?
Yeah, so you know, these under 10% that we, at the beginning of the meeting, that we voted to keep out of the hopper, you know, no voting on them, whether or not, even if through the Rory process, I mean, holistically speaking, you know, the process speaks for itself. If they're voted on average at a low, you know, overall Rory by the whole group, then it would seem, you know, prudent to say, all right, well, they just didn't meet our criteria. I'm just wondering, in the past, has that always been our hard line in the sand, or have we gone through ones that, even though perhaps because of the way that they didn't meet certain criteria of the Rory, but for instance, again, example of active shooter. I mean, if we took a vote and said, you know, if there's a unanimous vote that everybody thinks for $75,000, despite a low, you know, aggregate Rory score, we should recommend funding of it. I mean, have we ever done that in the past? Because it seems like with some of these, you know, that don't necessarily fit the criteria the best way, but, you know, being the members of this board might ultimately agree either unanimously or by supermajority that we should, you know, put it in the hopper, or at least put it at the bottom of the funding kind of hierarchy. And if we have money that it'd be worthwhile, it might be a prudent, flexible, you know, tool to have in the chest.
Yeah, so good question. And yes, we have done that. And I believe, and if anyone didn't get the perception that we could do that this time around, what my intention was is by going through even those in the list, that if you wanted to speak about one, you could. So if someone felt, well, gee, this is something I want to discuss because I think it has merits beyond the scope of the ranking of relative importance ranking, it has importance for the community, we can do that. And if there's a particular one that someone wants to do that on, this is a good time to do it. And I'm happy to go through the red list again. Peter, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, well, so I think just from the beginning, and maybe Jason spoke too soon, but I mean, he seemed to recommend that we just disregard any in the red, but then he was the first to bring up the active shooter, and I know he had to run, but I think he would probably support the idea, and I don't know if he knew that that was an option, that, you know, if we go through all the reds, people could pick one out and say, you know, even though the score is low, I truly think that we should support it. You know, is there any, you know, then maybe we take a vote, maybe that's when we voted in the past. Because it seemed to line up directly with his issue with the active shooter gear, I would think.
Okay, fair enough. So let's just move on that. We'll go through the list of red. Jason's not here, so unfortunately he doesn't get a bite at this apple. But again, next week, if he's got one in mind, he can bring it up. And I'm just going to go through the reds and see if there's a particular one that anyone would like to speak on, which is the, let me get to the top. Don't want to make anybody dizzy here. Oh, actually, we did go through these. I remember saying decommissioned fire cisterns, technical rescue equipment. Didn't we go through these?
You did run through that list.
I did. I thought so, but we'll do it again.
Yeah.
We have time, and this is part of the process. So, decommissioned fire cisterns, technical rescue equipment. My personal favorite, voted 70 on the scheduled replacement value there.
Yeah.
Administration car for the training in EMS. Active shooter response.
I mean, I'll speak on Jason's behalf there, you know, for short money like that, to me, it seems like a prudent, you know, community, something that benefits the community. I mean, it's probably a low, hopefully, you know, pray to God, a low or no probability chance, but I think, you know, for first responders, to have anything that they might need, you know, for $75,000, I would support putting it into the hopper.
Okay, fair enough. So what I think we're going to do is, just given Jason isn't here and we are going to have, I think it'll be relatively brief discussion on the new requests, supplemental requests to existing requests next week, that will pick up any of these particular items, noting it's 11 now. We'll pick up any of these that we'd like to review as a group next week, unless someone would like to do it now. Okay. So that, and at least what we'll do today is we'll get through the list. And if Jason has any in particular he'd like to add, he can do that quickly at the beginning of the meeting. So Peter?
Sorry, don't mean to backtrack, but I think I would like to put the skate park fencing in there too for discussion. That was at the top. I think it was the first one. Apologies for waffling on that, or sorry, the first.
So there's decommission.
I thought it was on there.
Oh, it's
Am I
down
crazy?
lower. It was on the screen when we first.
Oh,
started
gotcha.
talking,
Right.
and then
My
it
bad. So
scrolled
we
down.
haven't got there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. The utility train vehicle at fire department. Okay. We're gonna jump down to natural resources vehicle replacements, one new and one replacement. Christie?
Just a thought, that utility terrain vehicle, having been an EMT before, and oftentimes when I'm out with my pets and stuff walking around, I sometimes think, how would someone get out here if there's an issue? Other than like people running into the woods with all the trails that we have and dirt roads and stuff. I may have, I can't remember, I may have supported that a little more than what it's showing. So I don't know. I kind of not sure about that one for me.
Would
But
you like to do a review next week?
Yeah, if we could, I'd like to kind of look, I just want to kind of look at the supporting documentation a little bit more and just get my thoughts around it.
Okay, and thanks, Christy. So I've marked it as such. I think you make a good point too. So if someone asks for a review, I would just, request that, as Christy suggested he'll be doing, is please re-review the information, because if a matter has been addressed within the documents, it would be helpful for you to know that. It'd be helpful for the group. It may change your perspective on whether you want to review it or not. It may make your position stronger, but be informed at the next meeting so we can advance it efficiently. Christy?
I was just going to add, the fire department is one of our departments that does put everything inside. So just a thought
Yep, fair enough.
for the most part. But
Peter?
we can discuss it.
Just really quick, following on your comment there. So, I mean, obviously reviewing, being as informed as possible, but I mean, let's assume that somebody's exhausted all the information that we have and based again on the criteria, it scored low, but we still, to my point, that we still think it is something we should support. I think that's kind of the crux of this further review for the items that have fallen below the 10% band.
Agreed. I'm
Gotcha.
just suggesting
Making
that there's, I'm just suggesting, go ahead if you, not necessarily anyone who's done it yet, but as a general comment to the membership, if you ask for a review, please review the supplemental docs and the backup information to make sure there's not something you missed.
Right.
Because,
Thank you.
it's all good probative discussion, but if it can be answered and it's not a question for someone else, then you've done yourself and everyone else a service. So no one in particular, no particular request in particular. Back to vehicle replacements at the health or natural resources rather. One new, one replacement. And our report comes out in January, but town meeting doesn't happen until April, God willing. So we can always, perhaps, in early January, we come up with a vehicle acquisition policy. We might revisit some of these things. So I just want to let you know we have some fluidity there too. Police department, replace and upgrade body camera video system. This is one that very well may be a legal requirement. I think it was on the edge of that, but I'm not positive. So when Rick does his, thank you, Rick, does his review of any that were read, Rick, I'll email you this list. That one may be one that we review, and it will be with the additional information Rick provides. Here's the chain link fence at the skate park. Peter, you want to review that?
Yes, please.
Fair enough.
Or further discuss it.
Yep.
to speak.
Fleet accessory, the forestry package for the cat skid steer.
I'll call that one out too, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I was also gonna call out the last two, the mechanic's truck and the mini sweeper. If I remember correctly, those are extremely outdated and unable to be fixed.
Thank you, Christy. You saved me having to do it. PFAS, we're down at town admin. No, I'm sorry, not PFAS, affordable housing. It's a high priority. I'd like to suggest we put that in as a review. I'm not suggesting it changes our outcome, but I think it's fair to give it a little bit more scrutiny. It wasn't, well, it was pretty well below, but it wasn't horribly below. New vehicle parks and rec manager, island-wide underground wiring feasibility study, the Nobody Farm housing development design,
That one I wanted to review, just with the priority of housing across town administration and trying to hire employees. I felt like it's a soft cost and it's one of those things like the active shooter where I felt like it was hard to get it to rank high enough.
Okay. And another result, duly noted, marked as for review. And then the other thing is, just to be clear with y'all, we don't often do it, but we do have the capacity to make a recommendation that with respect to soft costs, we're not really, this is making me think of the HDC where we kind of negotiate at the table. Perhaps there's an element of the soft costs that move the project forward without buying the whole baby and the bathwater. Maybe we just get the bathwater and we get it warmed up. I'm not suggesting we do that on this particular project, but I think it's important for all to understand we can make a recommendation based on our own rationale. If that's helpful. TSA flooring replacement. South Apron noise berm construction. Rick, the airport ones would be of particular interest to me, whether there is a aspect of legal requirement. I know I didn't vote high on this one based on the criteria in the Rorys, but I'm sure you'll go through all these, but I just wanted to mention it. Gate 8 hangar paving. The airport rescue and firefighting truck. That'll X, Richard.
Yeah, I'd like to look at that.
Let me scroll down here. We don't need to keep everyone in suspense. What's next?
If it's
that's it.
AIP, definitely.
Pardon me?
I said if it's AIP, then I am in full agreement with Richard.
Okay, yeah, it's not, but that's okay. We can still, we'll discuss.
Oh, the
And I'd
firefighting
also
truck?
like to get an idea where that fits into, if at all, legal requirements. Peter, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just said I thought he checked the firefighting truck, which has, I mean, it shows AIP on the description, but perhaps not.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
That may be my mistake. I'll check on that. Apologize. I'm not sure.
Okay,
I
yeah,
don't
for
think-
some reason in
I've
my
never-
mind.
I've
I
never
had
seen
it
a
as
fire
not.
truck.
Christy, I'm sorry. Christy, Kickham, go ahead.
No, I've never ever seen a fire truck under AIP. That's
Yeah, for some reason I didn't have that in my mind as one. Okay. So that is the list. I think this is very helpful. Richard?
Stephen, can you send that to the committee, your document?
Yeah, I will. I'm happily. So basically what's going to happen is anything that is not under review or, whoops. Anything that's not under review or an out year will be, see, there's my Apple skills. Can't even use a flat keyboard.
Yeah.
Will be in the hopper. And I'm just going to do this in front of y'all so that if there's anything missed, we have an opportunity to, you can proof me.
Stephen.
Yes.
While you're doing that, if I just want to add, I know Christie put aside the mechanics truck. I think that's a new purchase. I don't think they have a mechanics truck, and they're talking about that one being fitted to go out in the field. With that said, I don't think I rated it high,
Okay.
but
You're correct. It is.
We can
It is
discuss.
a new truck. The old vehicle, their old one went to sewer when we split DPW to sewer, so they do not have one.
Okay, and I'm not gonna take up your guys' time doing this. I will send you the final version. I think it's pretty clear. Normally I would just cut and paste, but I'm not even sure what Control C is on this. Okay, so I'll email this out to the group. Actually, you know what I'll do? Rick, I'll email this to you for observation OML, and then if you would be so kind as to send it out. What I'd like to suggest is that just 2 more minutes, I think worthwhile. Rick, do you think by Friday, no, tomorrow's Friday. That's the way my week's going. When do you think you would know? You should be able to go through any of the reds and take a look at the requests in the capital program software and determine if it was a legal requirement or life safety, or if it was borderline, get the info from a department head. Do you think that's a fair thing to do before end of business tomorrow?
I'm not here tomorrow. I will try, let me see how far I can get today.
Oh, Monday, how about end of?
Yeah,
business
Monday. Yes, Monday
Okay.
for sure. Sure.
So what I'd like to suggest is I will send this to Rick and he will update it with a note to the right. And if it's a life safety or imminent threat or something along those lines, we'll all have the same information prior to the meeting next week. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, I'm gonna stop my screen share. I am going to check our agenda, which I'm actually going off a stale agenda. Minutes will be circulated for review. Committee reports, any comments, anyone, any of the liaisons, Jill or Christy Ferrantello feel might be helpful for us functioning. Okay, green sheet committee reports. Go to the order. I'm just always going to presume we're heading in the right direction unless someone texts me otherwise, and then we can talk about it at the meeting. Date of next meeting will be December 16th at 10 a.m. and we'll meet via Zoom. Rick, is that going to change in January? Do you have any idea? Or we don't, no one knows, but we just know that it may. Or familiar with
What,
that?
the time of the day?
No, Zoom, I think
Oh, I
Yes,
haven't
Steve.
heard anything to that end. I think the way Erica was going about it was she asked who wanted to meet, and we said till the end of the year, roughly speaking. I think we can extend it if that's what you want to do.
yeah,
whether
I
that's
think I'm hopeful we can slide through. I understand that Governor Charlie Baker may be, or the legislature may be making a change to the allowance for Zoom. So we'll see what happens. But just be aware, y'all,
We
that
can Zoom until April.
until April.
It's the select board is going back in person January 12th.
Oh,
And so
thank you, Christy.
others will have the opportunity to. But under the Governor Baker's order, it's through April.
Oh, okay, excellent. That's really helpful information because I'd heard rumors. And all I wanted to say is if there's a chance we're going to meet in person, y'all might want to plan a commute because we'd probably end up being over at Wanacomit or something. But it sounds like we're going to be fine for this budgeting season and review period. Okay, data next meeting I did early. And with that, unless anyone has comments, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, Christy Ferrantello.
Aye.
Okay, Peter?
Aye.
Christy Kickham?
Hi.
Richard?
Hi.
And Jill?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Stephen.
Take care.
Guys.
Be succinct.